Hello folks, I wanted to make a point about Nikon DSLR purchase, but I'd like to first introduce the family member back. It's kind of like that old story about the family that leaves their dog 1,000 miles behind, and somehow the dog finds its way back to the family 1,000 miles away. I was saying for quite some time the one camera I woefully regret getting rid of some time ago was my Nikon D3. And just like my pet dog, it today has made its way back to me. Of course, I had to pay for it. But, you know, I sold it originally, so I had to pay to get it back. Now I had a ridiculous amount of Nikon DSLRs before, and now the level is one above that. I might need to get rid of at least one Nikon. What's one level above ridiculous? I think they call it redonkulous. But I wanted to make a point. I'm so glad I've got my Nikon D3 back. Definitely the toughest built, Canon or not, period. Canon or Nikon is the toughest camera Nikon, Canon, anybody has ever produced. I mean, I've always said the Nikon D700 is a tank, so what therefore then is a Nikon D3? Well, the D3 is a case-hardened howitzer, analogously. Let's make some comparisons between the two, since I've had more than a few people talk about, well, I'm interested in buying a really nice Pro Nikon DSLR, one of the older ones, and I don't care about video. You know, I don't give a damn about that. A lot of people do, but some don't. And you know, I care about video, but that's what my 3-chip camcorders are for. I really don't care about video on my DSLRs. I mean, I'm using them for photography, but that may not be the case for you. But running down some of the positive and negative attributes of the Nikon D3. Now, I love heavy cameras. Now, if you thought the Nikon D700 was heavy, you know, you ain't seen nothing. The D3 is insanely heavy. Now, that's just referring to the D700 itself, not with a vertical grip attached like I have here. Of course, the D3 has an integrated vertical grip. It is an all-magnesium chassis. It is just a heavy beast that you could literally club somebody over the head with repeatedly, and to be sure, is still working. One of the downsides of more than a few that I'll mention is that its batteries are rather expensive. New Nikon Genuine batteries, the ENL4A batteries are $100. You can buy used ones typically for 40 or 50 bucks. So the price of a used one of these costs as much as a new battery for the Nikon D700. One of the great things is that the camera has standard output at 9 frames per second, just blazing machine gun fast, and up to 11 frames per second. So I mean, you stick in continuous high, I mean, your balls will fall off and roll down in the gutter. It's just a stunning camera. Like I said, between Canon or Nikon or anybody, it's unquestionably the finest, most precision-made, beefy, indestructible DSLR ever made by anybody, Canon or Nikon. It is even heavier than the Nikon D4 and far better in construction. Not my opinion, that's just hardcore fact. Unlike the D700, which takes 1 compact flash card, the D3 takes 2 compact flash cards. One thing that would piss a lot of people off is that obviously the D700 has a pop-up flash, and it does have an autofocus assist lamp for shooting in low light that it actually sends out for autofocusing, you know, 25 yards or less or so, roughly, depending on the conditions. The Nikon D3 does not have that. The only autofocus assist it has is, as the Pro DSLR that it was designed to be, it has no pop-up flash. You have to throw on a Nikon speed light with the autofocus assist coming through the speed light for low light situations. So you're going from a heavy camera, a super heavy camera, to a super heavy camera. That would tick some people off. It doesn't bother me a bit. So you either have to manual focus or use a built-in use an attachable speed light for autofocus assist in low light situation. Now it does have the same sensor as the Nikon D700, which is made by Matsushita or Panasonic, But due to the AD converters and the way the Nikon processes the image, since it does have much, much superior ultra high ISO performance compared to the D700, it does not have the same image output as the Nikon D700. It is very reminiscent and it is unique. It is definitely, as the D700 is extremely unique to any other current modern DSLRs like D7100, 7200, D810, D610, D750. It stands unique. So does the Nikon D3 stand unique, but it's not exactly identical. It is very reminiscent. That's about the most general thing I could say between it. Far better high ISO noise reduction than D700, but for most people, myself included, that doesn't really matter. I'm not shooting up in ISO 6400 or 3200 extremely rarely, so to me that really doesn't matter. It matters for some people. One of the great things is that the shutters can easily go past 450,000 clicks on the Nikon D3. That's one of the downsides too, that if you ever plan on finding a Nikon D3, now most Nikon D3s currently average about $12 to $1,300, $1,400, and the bad thing is that every used Nikon D3 basically has been owned by a professional, because when it came out it was one expensive girl. I mean, she's one high-priced chick. She was $5,000 when she came out. To me, she still is a $5,000 camera, but the problem is that if you want to find a used one, they look like they've been drugged behind a truck and they got a bazillion clicks on them. Now you can find a lot of really nice looking D700s that have low shutter counts, but it is damn hard to find a D3 that just has not had the piss snot whipped out of it, and just whipped out of it hard. But it's designed for that, and the people that bought these, you know, at $5,000 and slightly reduced since then, when it came out, 2007, but technically 2008, really, when they started rolling out. They whipped the piss out of them. I mean, every one of them has been piss whipped. So it's hard to find one in a really pristine shape. As I said, the Nikon D3 is the best camera ever made by Nikon. That's not my opinion. Does it beat the Nikon D4 and D4S as far as build quality? It sure does. I mean, where money is no object, the D3 beats the hell out of all of them. Is it dated technology? Is it a 12 megapixel sensor? It sure is. But I don't know exactly what you plan on printing out. But a 20 by 30 print back in 2008 and 9 is still a 20 by 30 print here in 2015. So you need to be more realistic and more pragmatic. And some people say, well, you're clinging to old technology. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm actually pragmatic. That's not to say that I do not love my pair of Nikon D810s with 36 megapixel sensors, and I love the Nikon D810 with its 36 megapixel sensor and its extremely quiet shutter. I mean, I do love it, but I'm being pragmatic. I said this camera was $5,000 new in 2008. The only problem is now that even though I spoke a bit about the D700 and the prices have gone up, this is still basically a $700 camera, great shape, low shutter count. Whereas finding a Nikon D3 in decent shape, it's going to be $1,200 to $1,400. So it is double the price basically in likewise condition between the two. So you're talking $700 versus $1,400 roughly. And she is one heavy sucker. The point I wanted to get to finally in discussing the Nikon D3 or the D700 is that if you're shopping either for a second camera, say you've got to do a D750, it's like, well, I want another secondary camera. You know, it's like someone has a brand new Toyota Land Rover or something, but you know, they got a second car. It's like, I'm going to buy something. It's like, no, how about I buy an old Rolls Royce? Or how about I buy a neat old BMW? I mean, it's my premise that I bought a BMW Z3 a few years back, and it's just cherry red, and it had chrome roll bars on it. I bought it that way, and it just looks like $1 billion. I mean, I only paid $6 grand for it, but if you're 10 feet away from that car, it just looks like the most expensive car on the face of the earth. I mean, it looks better, you know, than a Lamborghini. Never got so many compliments as I have out of that old BMW Z3. The same applies here as far as philosophy and pragmatism, either on a secondary body. You know, it's like, well, if I'm going to blow $1,000, what can I get for $1,000? I mean, I'm behind you 100% when it comes to an advanced Nikon DSLR. But a 20 by 30 print is still a 20 by 30 print is still a 20 by 30 print. So while I'm more steering towards these as secondary cameras, they're still primary cameras. And you know, they still command really, really, really hardcore heavy sales. I mean, you list a Nikon D3 or D700, you got a million people that know about cameras, that know the quality of what these are, and they just, you know, they swoop in and they bid on them like crazy. Even before I started mentioning the Nikon D700, I mean, it is just hot and heavy. Unfortunately, due to my flapping lips, the price has gone up on it substantially, because all these people that have bought the D700 is like, oh my god, this camera produces such amazing images, and it's cheap, and it's built like a tank, and I don't care that it's heavy. I mean, it's half Rolls Royce and half tank and half sex and sugar. It's basically the summation of everybody that's bought a Nikon D700 off me has said. So those are the plus and minuses of D3. You are going to have to pay twice as much for it. You throw it in continuous high, I mean, it'll fire off like a freaking machine gun. It's rather stunning in continuous high. You have 5 frames per second on a Nikon D700, and you have 9 frames per second on the Nikon D3, but up to 11 frames per second in crop sensor mode. Like I said, the batteries are expensive. It does take 2 compact flash cards, and you ought to see the chassis on this thing. Once all the guts are removed, the chassis on this thing is just a huge block of alloy. It is just, it is an unspeakable beast. We can do audio recording on the Nikon D3. Let me actually show you the back of the Nikon D3. Now the battery compartment, unlike most Nikons, which is here, it's over here to the side. And here's the door for opening up, and you can see we have 2 compact flash, not SD, but 2 compact flash card slots. Okay. Let me actually turn the camera on. You do have the ability to do voice memo. I actually recorded a voice memo on a test shot when I got my baby back today. I'm calling this my baby. And this is the Nikon D3 Professional DSLR. That way you could leave a voice memo on your test shots. Huge pentaprism, definitely the brightest. This is for choosing spot, matrix, or center weighted metering. It is just an enormous beast. As I said, integrated vertical grip. We have ISO and quality. Large top LCD display. It is very much akin to the Nikon D700 in layout. D700 just came out directly after this. Like I said, no pop-up flash, so that's a downside for some people. And this is the battery compartment of the Nikon D3. You can actually, with the vertical grip of the Nikon D700, use this battery. And check out the next video and I will talk about that. So, but primarily, other than talking about me getting my beloved baby back, my Nikon D3 here, what I wanted to mention is something that you should consider. Well, obviously it isn't 2008 anymore. The fact remains that it's a philosophy you need to consider. Like, you can buy a brand new Chevy, a brand new Toyota, or you can buy, like, for the same amount of money, you know, an older Rolls Royce. And really the same sort of analogy applies here. And to me, this, you know, a Rolls Royce is a Rolls Royce is a Rolls Royce. As long as it's still kicking, that's something to consider as either a primary, but definitely so consideration as a secondary camera, because it is just an unfathomable and unstoppable beast. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take that into consideration.